Most of my patients consider melatonin to be a safe, natural sleep aid that you can take long term without much consequence. But what if I told you guys that the long-term use of melatonin may actually lead to heart failure and even death? And you guys are hearing me right. We're talking about very serious things, heart failure and even death. So I'm Dr. Garrett Rossi. I'm a psychiatrist and creator at Shrinks and Sneakers. And today we're going to be breaking down what the science really tells us about melatonin supplementation for insomnia and whether or not this is really a safe supplement to be taking long term. When people think about insomnia, they think of it as difficulty falling asleep or difficulty maintaining sleep, but insomnia isn't just about those factors. It actually wreaks havoc on both your body and your mind. And some of the things that can happen with chronic insomnia is things like impaired memory, impaired attention, and dysregulated emotions. It worsens anxiety and depression, but that's not all. Insomnia actually has many physical effects on us as well, such as increasing our blood pressure, raising our risk for heart attack, stroke, and even metabolic problems like insulin resistance and weight gain. It can even impair your immune system by lowering the protective cytokines and driving inflammation. So I always say in psychiatry, a big part of what we do is get people to sleep, but of course we want people to have safe, healthy, natural sleep. You might be wondering, how did melatonin supplementation become so popular in the first place? Well, here's the deal with melatonin. It's actually a hormone that your brain naturally makes in the pineal gland. It's used to regulate circadian rhythm, your so-called internal clock. Now, this supplement is relatively cheap, it's over the counter, and it seems safe because, hey, it's naturally produced by your body. So millions of people take it nightly without a second thought. I've even recommended it to some patients myself, especially when there is what's called a delayed sleep-wake phase disorder, meaning that their natural sleep cycle runs late. But the evidence for chronic insomnia isn't as good as one might think. And we're going to crack into that in the next section. Whenever you're considering taking a medication or a supplement for that matter, as we're talking about here, you should always think about what the research and the data actually tells us about this. Because many times supplement companies and drug companies are going to inflate the potential clinical relevance of a medication, make it seem like more than it truly is. So when we look at the research for melatonin, it only shortens the time to fall asleep by about 5 to 7 minutes. And you might be saying 5 to 7 minutes on average doesn't sound like much. And you'd be correct, because this may not be as clinically relevant as one thinks. And that's not exactly a game changer if you're the type of person who's lying awake in bed all night trying to fall asleep. For staying asleep, the data is weak as well. Melatonin is actually metabolized relatively quickly, and unless you're using a delayed release version of the supplement, it's out of your system really fast. Now, if you're older, say age 55 and up, and your natural melatonin levels are lower because they do lower with age, you might see more benefit with melatonin supplementation. However, we should keep in mind that the American Academy of Sleep Medicine doesn't recommend melatonin as a first-line treatment for chronic insomnia. In fact, they actually rate the quality of the evidence supporting the use of melatonin as very low. The gold standard, according to our sleep medicine experts, is going to be something called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. That's what fixes the behaviors and the brain patterns that are actually keeping people awake at night. So here's where things get interesting, and quite honestly, a bit concerning if you're the type of person who's been using melatonin on a nightly basis. So at the 2025 American Heart Association conference, researchers presented a study that used a massive database of over 130,000 adults with insomnia. Now, what they found was quite compelling with respect to melatonin use. Those who used melatonin for a year or more had a 90% higher chance of developing heart failure. they were 3.5 times more likely to be hospitalized for it and nearly twice as likely to die from any cause. So you should let that sink in for a minute, and in particular if you're the type of person, like I said, who's supplementing with melatonin all the time. Now, of course, we should keep in mind this is observational data, meaning that we can't necessarily say that melatonin caused the problem, but maybe people who use it have worse insomnia or other health issues that we're not accounting for in this study. However, we should still take some pause whenever we see a signal like this. We should not ignore it. So let's say you're a little frightened by all this data on melatonin and you want to consider a treatment for insomnia and you want to do what's most evidence-based. Well, everyone should really start with cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. This is a form of, again, retraining your brain and body to sleep the proper way. You can also add in what's called stimulus control. So these are essentially sleep hygiene techniques where you're only going to bed when you're sleepy and you're getting out of the bed if you can't sleep and going back and trying again, and not necessarily using the bed for anything like screen time, reading, etc. You can do another technique called sleep restriction, and this is a way of temporarily shortening your time in bed to build sleep drive. I did a whole video on it previously. If you look in my videos, you'll find that. Relaxation training can also be really helpful. So breath work, progressive muscle relaxation, mindfulness meditation, all of these things can be extremely helpful. If you're searching for a slightly stronger option, such as a medication or pharmaceutical drug, there are several options to choose from. You can try low-dose doxepine, S-zopiclone, Melatonin, suvorexant, or zolpidem. I try to stay away from the Z drugs personally. I don't really like those, but low-dose doxepine, Melatonin, or suvorexant are all reasonable options. If you're going to use melatonin, it's best to use it only in the short term, and you're going to keep it for circadian rhythm problems such as jet lag. Listen, guys, I am not anti-melatonin. I'm pro-evidence. So I'm always thinking about what is the best, most scientific evidence base for a particular disorder, and then I'm using the techniques and treatments that are available for it. With melatonin, if it helps you fall asleep a little bit faster and you use it on a short-term basis or you're using it for jet lag, fine. But if you've been taking melatonin for years and thinking it's completely harmless, it might be time to rethink that habit. And you should always keep in mind that just because something is a natural product doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. Natural doesn't equal safe. And the best medicine for insomnia, in my opinion, does not come from a pill. It comes from restoring your rhythm and not replacing it or trying to mask it with a medication or other technique. So again, my name is Dr. Garrett Rossi. Thank you so much for watching Shrinks and Sneakers. And if you found this video helpful, hit the like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the channel because it really does help me to keep these conversations going and keeps me excited and interested in the field of psychiatry as well. I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks again.